Let's go to the laws of nature. The laws of nature. The laws of nature, the laws God gave us, a significant slice of it is our common law tradition. Unwritten, we observe it, how it works, and a significant slice of our common law tradition applied to government is our Constitution of the United States. We're going through the Stansbury's Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, 333 questions. We're on question 154. Clause by clause and blow by blow, that's my method. Is habeas corpus a great and very important privilege? And ought all Americans to guard it with the greatest care? Answer: yes. It is one of the greatest rights of a freeman. Now, this is written in 18 and 28. Notice he doesn't say citizen, he says freeman. That was the word that we used. That's the word we should use in our common law tradition, not citizen. Citizen means to be a part of the city, the cult of the city. We are freemen. It's interesting here, he uses the word privilege in the question. This habeas corpus, a great and important privilege. And then he says in the answer, it is the greatest of rights. Well, which is it? Well, traditionally, privilege and rights are synonyms, but we have used them different in our common law country. A privilege, we have used privilege like we use license. What's a license? That's another fancy Latin word that means permission. Now, that's another fancy Latin word, permission. You can tell the fancy Latin words. They always have more syllables. Permission, that's 3. Privilege, that's 3. Rights, that's 1. That's English. Right. You know, we tend to separate a privilege from a right. We say a privilege is license, permission from government. And a right is a responsibility that God gives us. Is that true? Yes, that's true. But a right is you could say it this way, is permission, license given from God. It is, but we use different words because of the greater importance. We call these that come direct from our Maker fundamental, foundational. And if it comes from government, it comes indirect. All authority, all right, all warrant, all privilege, all license. The Bible says, Romans 13, verse 1, all of that comes from our Maker. Some of it comes direct from our Maker to the man, right to me, right under the dome of heaven, just wham, right on me. No, nothing in between. We call those fundamental rights, responsibilities, duties, to put it another way. But all those privileges and rights, if they're right and lawful, here's another word, lawful, if they come through men, God delegates them to one person who delegates them to me. If I'm an insurance agent, I don't get that right to sell insurance direct from God. I get it through an insurance agent who gets it from a company. Does the company, where does he get it? You trace, if it's lawful, if it's truly a right, you can trace it back to the fountain, the source of all permission, privilege, right. So to sum up, the distinction is some rights come to us indirectly from God through men, governments, institutions, whatever, even our own parents. We call those civil rights. Watch me close here. This kind of stuff, these words are kicked around in the patriot community like cordwood, and nobody really ever stops to explain them. I can only give you what I've discovered practicing law. You know, you go to law school, you don't have much time to learn much. Kind of get you acclimated to a certain way of thinking. They can do that, but you learn a lot about law if you practice law. That's where it comes to you, and I keep learning things I had no idea about. Oh, I know more than I did. Well, what I want to do is pass that along to you, because if the non-lawyer in America, the non-lawyer does not understand these fundamentals, it'll never work to our advantage. And we're to the point now where the lawyer doesn't have a clue of what I'm telling you right now. A lawyer in America, most of them, many of them anyway, don't have a clue, and the ones that do not teach others. Who's responsible for passing this kind of information along, according to God? I'll tell you who's responsible. The men that are the leaders among Christianity, we call them preachers, men of the cloth, they're responsible for teaching these things. Are they? Are they? When's the last time you heard a really good in-depth presentation on the Ten Commandments? It's in the Bible. What good is it? Well, we're under grace now. We don't need that. Well, okay, let's just take 70% of the Bible. That'd be the 69% the Old Testament. Rip it out and throw it in the trash. We don't need that. Jesus Christ quoted the book of Deuteronomy. That's part of the law of Moses. That's the heavy duty part of the law. He quoted that more than any other writing. He quotes it more than any. Why would you ignore it? It's for your guidance, your enjoyment. And without it, there's no order, there's chaos. Who's supposed to be teaching it? You know, I listened to Billy Graham years ago. He, of course, lived to be pretty near 100. I listened to him years ago, well, 10, 15 years ago. And the fella interviewing him said, Billy, if you had things to do over, what would you do different? You know what he said? Listen to me close. This is the most famous evangelist in the world, America for sure. Billy Graham spoke to a larger crowd than any man in recorded history in South Korea back in the 70s or 80s, I forget which it was. He was about 50 years old then, so that would have been, been in the 70s, I guess. Yeah, I think that was when it was. He was called America's pastor. Met with him and prayed with him. So they asked him, if you had anything to do, what would you do? And Billy said, if I had my life to live over, I'd study the Bible. Oh, I read it and I talked about some things, but I didn't spend my life studying the Bible. Of course he didn't. I mean, that was abundantly apparent. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. If you don't know anything about it, you won't talk about it. And he didn't. He talked about, the Bible says, and he was an evangelist, and he talked about how God saphens men from hell. That was his focus. He didn't talk about anything else. That's a lot, I understand. But he himself said, I wish I'd have studied the Bible. Isn't that something? I'd take that as an old gray head giving out wisdom. Study the Bible if you want to do something. I'm not Billy Graham. I don't do what he does, but what can I do? Well, I can try to talk about the laws of nature, and the laws of nature is God. Habeas corpus. Well, what good is habeas corpus? We were talking about it here, question 154. Habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is an important feature of our common law tradition. It's a product of legislation. It's legislated. Parliament legislated it back in the 1600s, trying to find a way to protect and agree with God's trust settlement with Adam's race. Be fruitful, multiply, have babies, and scatter. And we're all part of that. We are all that part of that multiplication. We were born of woman. And then he says, scatter. And it's a word, the Hebrew word is a verb form of the word seed. Seed, it means to sow. Be sown, it's passive in the New Testament. We talked about that in Peter. We're going through the book of 1 Peter. And he says right up front, I'm writing this letter to those that are sown, scattered. The better word is sown, because that's exactly what it says. Is there a scattering? Yes. But the analogy to sowing seed, God sows seed by sowing his people throughout the lands of this place we call earth. He moves us. My ancestors came here. Yours did too, or you wouldn't be here. Well, you may be listening, you'd be on the other side of the pond someplace, but those of us that are here, and by the way, if you're on the other side of the pond, your ancestors came to wherever you are. Somehow. I was reading the other day about the history of Britain, how Brutus, a fellow, it wasn't the Brutus that got stabbed to death, but a fellow named Brutus came there, and they called his descendants and the people that came with him, they migrated there. They called them Britons. That's from Brutus. And they were brindled. Oddly, they were brindled. Oddly? Well, that's not odd. You know what brindle is. You don't? Oh, okay. Well, let's talk about what's brindle, just for fun. Well, this is the Tasmanian Word Association Hour. We talk about words. I didn't know what a brindle hound was. I found out recently. One wandered into my neighbor's place, and I said, that's called a Tennessee brindle. It's a new breed, well, relatively new. You know, treeing hounds only exist in America. When our ancestors came here from the English-speaking world in the old country, they brought hounds with them, but the hounds they brought with them, and there were wolf hounds and all sorts of hounds, but the hounds would chase wild animals and critters, wolves, coyotes, coons, possums, bears. But if the critter ran up a tree, they just turned around and went home. They weren't interested. But every once in a while, one of these Americans that brought these hounds over here, whether they'd have their hound trailing a critter, and the critter would run up a tree, and the hound would stop every once in a while and start baying up the tree. And they said, we need that kind of hound here in America, because when the critter goes up the tree, we need him to stay up the tree. And if the hound don't tree, that's called treeing, the critter won't stay up the tree and he'll get away. So all the hounds in America, how did that happen? Well, they found a male that would do that, and then if they'd run across a female, then they'd breed them. And we kept doing that in America generation after generation. Pretty soon all of our hounds were treeing hounds. Did you know that? Yeah. So we went coon hunting at home. We were looking for those hounds to tree the coon. Yeah, we hoped he treed the coon in something other than a den tree. Because if he treed the coon in the den tree, then the coon you'd go inside in the den, inside the trunk of the tree, and that'd be the end of that. You couldn't get him out. Don't be trying to square off with no raccoons. You'd be better off running through a burning house with gasoline drawers on and try to tangle with a coon cat. They'll tear you up. They're tough. They're smart too. Well, smart, I don't know if it's instinct or logic, but the things they can do boggles the mind. How to throw dogs off the scent and deal with in fights. You know, there's plenty of stories on record, raccoons killing grizzly bears. Yeah. They scramble around, get up on their backs, go over on their heads, put their claws in the bear's eyes and rip their eyes out. And if they're in the water when that happens, then they drown the bear. Get on top of his head. What can the bear do? He can't see, he's underwater. By the way, I've watched them try to kill coon hounds too that way. They'll lure them into water and drown them. Hounds are good swimmers, but, well, the brindle. We're talking about brindle. Tennessee brindle hound is a treeing hound. Doesn't look like much, but he's brindled. What does that mean? That means he's got little spots all over his body. And the hair it grows in spots, dark and light. Well, these Britons, Brutus, apparently some of them were freckled. And that's one of the theories of the origin of Britain. Britain, it's a word that's related to an ancient word. The point is, no matter where you are, your people came from someplace else and they scattered. And that all started back in Genesis chapter 11 after the settling of the city of Babylon. And God said we're supposed to do that. He wants his land taken care of. He wants people to live on it. He wants them to multiply. He wants them to take lordship over the land. And you can't do that unless you multiply. You can get there and scatter. God said to the Israelites, I'm giving you this land. But I'm not going to give it all to you at once because you're not going to be able to take care of it. There's not enough of you. But as you multiply and then keep scattering out, I'll give it to you. I'll drive out your enemies, and I'll drive out the carnivorous beasts that will eat you. I will drive them out, he says. Oh. You know, one of the signs of God's curse upon a people is carnivorous beasts keep eating them. Yeah, that's what's happening in America. Our ancestors and some of us, even in recent times, have driven out the carnivorous beasts, the mountain cats, the grizzly bears. Not that we want to get rid of them, we just want them to be driven out of where we are so we can farm the land. And they got wild hogs down in Texas that tearing up agriculture by the millions. Millions. They got a critter down in Louisiana that has taken over the swamp and is moving up the coast. It's from South America. It looks like a giant muskrat. Tearing up everything, ruining everything. Open season on them. Open season on coyotes and timber wolves when I was a teenager. They were like vermin. Open season on mountain cats in California until 1970. Why? They were like vermin. They were thick. They were killing livestock. So what do? Government. Just leave it up to government. Pass a law. The president signed it that the mountain lion's an endangered species, and they went from open season in California to you can't shoot them at all. So what happens? Well, give them enough time, they start eating people. That's happened. Now that's happening. California, Washington State, Idaho, mountain lions eating people. Arizona, jaguars. The last jaguar was killed in America in New Mexico in 1948. That's my memory on the subject. 1948, last one that was seen, last one that was killed. Now, jaguars, when I was growing up, they only lived in South America and they'd wandered down into Central America. Now they're back, trying to eat people. Oh, the news isn't going to tell you about it. That's what's happening out west. They're eating people. Again, I'm not against them, but God wants us to take dominion over the land to make it productive, and you can't do that when carnivorous beasts are trying to eat you nonstop. How do you relax? You don't. And the only thing to stop a grizzly bear, those critters will eat you for sure. I just read go to the internet. It's amazing how many people are eaten, attacked, tore up, ripped up by grizzlies. Old Ephraim, they call him. Well, again, I'm not against grizzly bears. I don't want to be around where they're trying to eat me. And I was talking to a fellow last night. He goes hunting in northern Idaho every year and goes he goes elk hunting. And he was carrying a 44 mag. That's an eagle. It's a big hog leg of a pistol, about yay long, very accurate, got a barrel. Well, there's a 50 caliber. There's a 50 caliber too. That was the Desert Eagle. Now I'm remembering him. If I've got this wrong, some of you will get on the text and correct me. He said, but that won't do it. 50 caliber, that's a half inch, 0.50. That's a half inch diameter across the inside of the barrel. 50 cal. Big slug. Won't stop a grizz. Another thing to stop a grizz is a 10 gauge or 12 gauge slug. Shotgun slug, we call them deer slug. I read a story the other day about a fella. He was a construction worker out of work, lived in a little trailer, traveled around. He stopped in this one area just to take a break. He'd made a little money and he wanted to get out in the woods, be by himself. He had a little travel trailer. It was kind of a fifth wheel deal, and he was inside cooking something that smelled real good, like fried chicken, something like that. Had a propane tank on it, and he had her fired up, and he was cooking it in lard. And you can imagine, put a few spices on it and how that good that would smell. Well, little Grizz, they do what their nose says. That Grizz could smell that, and here he come. Well, he had the door locked on the fifth wheel. Grizz smelt that, and that drove him crazy. Took his fingernails, his claws, put them in the edge of the door, and pried the door out until it just popped, and he broke the whole blasted thing in two. It came in. Well, long story short, when they found the young fella, old Grizz had eaten half of him. There was no place to go. He did fire through the door with, I believe it was a 38 caliber pistol. May as well have been shooting a pea shooter at him. Well, he may have died later, but didn't save his life. Well, the Bible says that's God's judgment on a people. I'm not saying this man was guilty of anything. I'm just saying, let's do things God's way. Let's look at things the way God wants us to look at them. And habeas corpus is our jurisdiction to say we've got to ensure that God's trust settlement with us, the terms of it are preserved. The right to travel, to get up and move when you want to. Go. That's a Christian idea, friends. Tell one of the story. This is the foundation of habeas corpus. Jed Smith. Jedediah Smith from Pennsylvania. Born, I believe, in 1799, I believe, in Pennsylvania. Migrated west when he got to be old enough, and he got to be about 20. He migrated west. He was looking for excitement, and he migrated into Illinois. Now, in those days, that was a wild and woolly west. He got up on the Illinois River and trying to make a living around Peoria, where Peoria is, and then he went south in Jacksonville, and the Illinois hits the Mississippi River, and then there's St. Louis there. They got down to St. Louis. Well, St. Louis was a French settlement originally, and it was a jumping off point for the fur trade going west. Lieutenant governor of the Missouri Territory was a fellow named Ashley, and he put out a call and a flyer posted all over town for, he wanted 100 young men to go west and see if they could make a fortune in beaver. So Jed Smith volunteered. Well, he got out west. And by the way, a staunch Christian man, wouldn't chew tobacco, wouldn't smoke tobacco, never cursed or cussed. That's impressive. And when he became partners in the company. And when he went west, they called him captain. He just people looked to him to make decisions, and he became partner, and Captain Smith, they called him. Well, he was the first man to lead a party from Santa Fe, New Mexico to California. No American had ever done that. First American to cross Nevada, east and west. First American to cross Nevada, north and south. First American to travel the length of the west coast of what is now the United States, clean up from Southern California, Pueblo, Los Angeles, clean up the Canadian border. Of course, a lot of his friends died. He was in the wilderness 9 years, made an absolute fortune. 9 years is enough, retired. So retired about age 30, back to Jacksonville. There was a Bible college there. He had money. He bought it in Jacksonville, Illinois. He bought his mother a house, put her in it, paid the tuition at the Bible college at Jacksonville for his brother to go to school. Bible college is still there, by the way. Then he got bored and said, well, I'm a little older now, and up in his 30s. That's too old. So he made a living taking cargo trains, wagon cargo trains from Independence, which is near Kansas City, to Santa Fe. And he got killed by the Comanche in what is now the Oklahoma Panhandle. Long story, he was looking for water. But when he first went to Los Angeles, he got there, and the Spanish there at the Pueblo, it was called Pueblo Los Angeles, they brought him in his party. They wined him and dined him, tried to give him cigars and wine and fed him a sumptuous meal, and then arrested all of them and threw them in the jail as American spies. Finally, there was an interceding that happened, and he got loose he promised them, I won't stay here, I'm going north. So with that promise, he left. But he wasn't happy about it, but he said this, and he wrote about it. He could write. And he wrote about it, and he said the Spaniards, well, when they crossed over, when they come into Los Angeles, they had to cross Banning Pass, which is now right where Palm Springs is on one side, the San Gregorio and the San Bernardino Mountains on the other side, and that's called the Banning Pass there, a little town there. Used to be a little town called Banning Pass. And they ran into these Indians herding cattle, and they found out that they worked for well, that's way out there, but that ranch was that big around Los Angeles, and they were slaves. And the plantation, they call it the hacienda system, which is the Roman system of agriculture. In Europe, they called it latifundia. Spain is a civil law country, law of the city, not law of the land, like the English-speaking world, and so their system of agriculture is slavery. The plantation system of the South is part of that. That was slavery. The hacienda system of the Spaniards, that was slavery. The latifundia system in the Roman Empire, that was slavery. The agriculture was slavery. The communist countries, starting with Egypt in the Bible, but going to Russia and China, they all use the commune. That is an agricultural system of slavery. Doesn't work well. Well, he asked them, of course, he was inquisitive, wanting to make money in beaver, so he's looking for beaver. And he looked over to if you're in Los Angeles, after a good rain, it'll wash the smog out of the sky, and you can see what Jed Smith and his men saw. Well, they see mountains all around, and they're white on the top. And he asked the Spaniards, he said, well, what are those mountains, those white tops? They said, we don't know. We call them the chalk mountains. Well, why do you call them the chalk mountains? Well, because they're white and we figure they're made of chalk. Smith about fell off his chair, laughed up his sleeve. He didn't want to make fun of his host. He thought they were friendly people until they threw him in jail. What am I saying? What I'm saying is they were there, but they didn't have it in their heart of hearts and their deep convictions of the covenant of God, of the Bible, being Romanist. They didn't have it to go see what those mountains were. As long as they could enslave these poor Indian tribes around there, which they did, the mission system was a system of slavery. It's a Roman canon civil law system. Agricultural slavery. That's why those missions were established. They won't tell you that. If you go to school in California, they'll talk about how wonderful and beautiful they are, and you'll be on the Camino del Rio, the King's Highway that runs up through Paso Robles and on up. I've been up and down that road and looked at the missions. They're not telling the truth. People seldom do. History is always rewritten falsely. You can find true history and know and then see why we are the way we are, but you got to look. Too much political talk going on. Well, what was it? They didn't have the sense of the trust settlement of God that they needed to scatter. They wanted to come to California, then they settled in, they wanted to smoke their cigars, drink their wine, and be dongs, and enjoy the largesse of what these slaves can provide. Now, that's different, and that's why we have habeas corpus, because in our common law tradition, we want to find a way to keep people, the powers that be, from throwing people in jail so they can't go where they need to go. Jail's an ugly thing. You see, habeas, the duty to scatter and conquer land is so strong in our common law tradition, because it's a Christian biblical tradition. That's not said much anymore, but the fundamentals of it are that. It's so strong that our common law tradition until the 1840s in America and Old England also. In the earlier days, they didn't even have jails. We didn't have them here. They got them in England. They didn't have them. Then they got them. And now, then we come to America, we didn't have them. We didn't have any jails. Well, we jailed people awaiting trial, but jail was never a punishment for a crime. Why? Because that's contrary to the Bible. That's why. It's contrary to the covenant, the trust settlement covenant of God. We don't want people to be restrained where they can't go when they feel the impulse. So what did the King of England say to us? He said, you can't cross the Allegheny Mountains. That's one of the reasons we went to war with them. These are all common law principles. Our Declaration of 76 is a list of common law principles that the old country wasn't allowing us to enjoy. One of them was entering new lands. It says so in our Declaration of 76. The king and his cronies do not let us enter new lands. The over mountain men went over the mountain in North Carolina. They went over the Alleghenies. They put down roots. They had their families. They started cutting down the trees and trying to find a place to plant some corn so they get through the winter. And they were shooting the game and salting it and putting it away, and they're all set up. And they got a letter from a fellow named Ferguson, who was the captain of the British troops, the Highlanders from Scotland. He was the captain. The Highlanders, a detachment of them was there, and he said, you either come back from over the mountains. If you don't come back, then we're coming after you and we're going to kill you. But we're not just going to kill you. We're going to hang you until you almost die. Then we're going to cut you down, and then we're going to slice your belly open, throw your guts out on the ground, and you're going to, while you're awake, and you're going to watch us burn your guts along with your gonads. We'll cut those off too. And then we're going to quarter your body. That means chop it up in 4 pieces. We're going to put it in a jar or a bucket and ship it to England in a sealed lead box to be disposed of at the king's pleasure. That's called being drawn and quartered. Hung, drawn, and quartered. 3 things. That's what the letter said. They all got together and pondered the letter and said, this guy's threatening to really do some nasty stuff to us. And they took a vote. What shall we do? They said, well, we ain't waiting for him to come and kill us, so let's go kill him and all of his men. They got their rifles together, made sure their powder horns were full, had plenty of lead shot, plenty of rations for the trip, and they started walking over the mountain looking for Ferguson and his men. They found them in a place, today it's called King's Mountain. It's a mountain in North Carolina. They found them there. They were camped on top of a hill. They surrounded them, surprised them, and killed every one of them. Killed them. I mean, if somebody is well armed and well trained and well equipped and promises to kill you, well, they will, unless you do what they say. And even then, you don't know, but they felt like that it's part of our common law tradition. I don't know that everybody understands that, but you've heard of the right to travel. That's part of that. I can't say this too much. I was saying it yesterday. So we have habeas corpus as a tool that the legislature in England passed in the 1600s, became part of our common law tradition, where you have the right to the jailer, forcing the jailer to prove if his jailing of you is lawful. That's called habeas corpus. That's all we need to say right now. You can read more about it on the internet. Question 155. May a man's children be punished by law for his offense? May a man's children be punished by law for the man's offense, for the man's crime, the father's crime. Does our common law permit that? No. That's why our Constitution doesn't permit it. Doesn't permit government to do that. Answer. Here's his answer. In some countries where a man has been guilty of treason, that is, making war against the government, a law is passed called a Bill of Attainder, by which his children are prevented from being heirs to him or to any other person. And if he belonged to what in those countries is called the nobility, and his children would have belonged to it too, they are prevented, nor can they, nor their children, nor their children's children, ad infinitum, can they recover the privilege of inheriting anything. And no such law is to be made in this country because the Constitution bars government from doing that. The Constitution expressly forbids it. Why do we have this in our common law tradition? In England, they got to violating it. If your father was committed or accused of treason, you were stripped of any possibility of ever having anything, ever going to school. You were reduced to nothingness. And your children and their children, and on it goes. Well, why is it that our common law doesn't allow that? Again, it's consonant with the Bible. What does the Bible say? What does the prophet Ezekiel say? Let me quote him. And as I quote him, I'm reminded of how emphatic this statement is. It's emphatic in the English. It's even doubly emphatic in the Hebrew text. The English text says this, Ezekiel, the prophet, "The soul that sinneth, it shall die." The soul, what is soul? That's the nephesh. That's a breathing man. That it has to do with respiration, nephesh. Life's breath, the breath of life, it says in Genesis. That's the word nephesh. And so the word soul is a word that the Hebrew text uses, the word for soul, breathing soul. That's a better way to translate it. And that's the way the winterized version translates it. It shall die. God will take away your respiration, your breath of life, and you'll die. What did God say to Adam, our grandpa? He said, in the day you sin, what? In the day you sin, in the day you violate my will, dying, you're dead. That's what the Hebrew text says. It's emphatic. So Ezekiel applies that on with other people. He says, the soul that sins, it shall die. But the Hebrew text is even stronger. It says this. It's not smooth English, but it's smooth Hebrew to them. It says, the soul, the one sinning, that soul shall die. Dying, it's dead. Oh, what's the point? Well, the point is that when a man's convicted of a crime, as in our common law tradition, his children are not to suffer for it. Do they? Yeah, people have a tendency to look at a child different if his father has gotten in some kind of bad trouble. That's fact. That's not God's way of looking at it. Who suffers? Now, jail is against the law. I've said that. It's against the Bible. You don't find anywhere in the Bible where jails are authorized as punishment for crime. We have a complete tradition in our Bible of law and government and religion. Nothing in there about jails. We do find in a place or two where people are held in ward awaiting trial. Well, we do that here. But we're supposed to grant bail if at all possible, too, because you're innocent until proven guilty. Our common law is very, very merciful in these ways. Men are not merciful. Well, who suffers when a fellow goes to prison for a year or two? That's easy. Does he suffer? Not like his wife and his children do. Will it affect him very much? Yeah, but not as much as it will affect his wife and children the rest of their lives. It's a traumatic experience, friends. Very traumatic. Had it ought to be done? No, it hadn't ought to be done. Well, then what are we going to do with all these dangerous criminals? Why don't we just go to the Bible and see what it says there? Oh, it covers it all. And as we go through the Bible, we'll get to it. We're not there right now. We're at the end of chapter 20 of Exodus. Habeas corpus. A man's children be punished for his offense. In some countries, I'd read that. Let's do one more. And then Miss Francine, have you got a song? Yeah?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Let me do another one. May a citizen of the United States be punished for doing what, when he did it, was not forbidden by any law, but against which a law was passed after he did it. Let me read that again, and then I'll try to unpack it. He goes back and forth. I know the word citizen is in the Constitution. I think that's unfortunate. But it was a popular word. These are freemen. We should call ourselves freemen. We are not votaries of any city religion, of any mother city, any metropolis. Well, no, that's not our common law tradition. That's the Roman tradition. Citizen, mother church, mother city, all that baloney. No, that's not us. If you got your foot in that system, get it out. If you're in it, get it out. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution. It's all a matter of how we perceive reality of religion, law, and government that ensures that we can enjoy the freedoms God has given us. May a freeman of the United States be punished for doing what, when he did it, was not forbidden by law. Well, for example, let's say that it's not forbidden by, that it's okay. There's no law against me or against my mother or my father. No law against driving without a driver's license. They tell me that they remember those days. Did you get a driver's license, drive down a dirt road or a gravel road? Who cared? But would it be right to arrest somebody for driving without a driver's license when there was no such thing, and then arrest them because the government passed a law said you got to have a driver's license to drive on the public road? So you drove without a driver's license, but there was no law, but now that there is, we're going to arrest you for having done so last year. I know that sounds crazy. That's just a hypothetical. That's not a real case that I know about, but it'd be that kind of thing. There are a lot of other examples because there's constantly laws being passed that make things unlawful that were not unlawful last year. Let me give you another example. This is a real case. I saw it happen. Al Gore, you remember him? He was a senator and he pushed a law through the United States, through the Senate. He was a senator from Tennessee. He pushed a law through that said it was a felony that carried up to 20 years, if you released any deleterious material into the environment. That's the words of the statute. A federal law, 20 years in prison if you released any deleterious material into the environment. Now, everybody I knew when I was growing up, every man, not every woman, every man got up, came downstairs, went out on the end of the front porch and drained his radiator. That's what, not every man, but a lot of men did. Why? Walk clean out the outhouse. That law made taking a leak in the woods, taking a leak beside your tractor when you jump off the tractor platform and you're farming, taking a leak beside your tractor or over in the fence row, it made it a felony that carries 20 years. It's still enforced, by the way. And people say, oh, nobody's gonna, don't push it that far. Well, no, I'm not pushing it that far. That's what it says. One thing for sure, that makes outhouses illegal, doesn't it? Sure it does. And when the women used to do their wash, and my mother used to go out to the milk house and the smokehouse beside it, and she'd do the wash once a week. We'd pump water over in there from the pump, and then she'd just release that water out on the ground, raising hogs and cattle out on the hill. They're releasing deleterious material into the environment constantly, and it washes down in the creek. That carries 20 years now if they want to push it. And don't tell me they won't. They're doing it already in a lot of places. But what about passing a law like that and then saying, okay, you took a leak out in the woods last Friday, and now the law says you can't do that. We're going to arrest you. And you come in and say, wait a minute, there was no law when I took a leak in the woods last Friday. Well, government will say, well, yeah, we're making it retroactive. Sorry. Our Constitution of the United States says that the government of the United States is not at liberty to do that. Not at liberty to do that. It's called an ex post facto law, and that's the words our Constitution uses. I wish they'd use English, but that was the popular use in the courts. Ex post, that means after, you know. Facto, after the fact. It means after the fact. The fact of the matter is, I drained my radiator in the woods last week, and then after that fact of that happening, they passed a law said that carries up to 20 years if you do it. No, laws are according to our Constitution, according to our common law. That's where our Constitution says it. Are from the day of the law forward, and no retroactivity to punish people who did something before the law was passed, the law disallowed after it was passed. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com.